Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on Facebook Live, YouTube, and on Twitter. As always, I'm Bryson Carver. We have got an absolutely loaded, I'm dead serious, loaded show on tap. NBA, it's not really the second half of the season because most teams have played 57, 58 games or so, 59, with about 20, a little over 20 games to go in the season. So we're not halfway through, but the All-Star break is over. We're in the stretch run. And speaking of that, these last 20 plus games of the regular season, the contending teams have kind of separated themselves, but then there's also these teams where we're like, I don't know, could they win the championship? Are they legit? Well, in today's show, I'll tell you. The contenders and the pretenders in the Western Conference and in the Eastern Conference. I know I have one contender that is going to stun you guys, and some pretenders that'll probably do the same. So looking forward to getting to that later in the show. As well as Daniel Jones reportedly winning $45 million per year. I'll get into that in just a second. That's my second topic. It's as mind-boggling as it sounds. I'll get to that. As well as Charles Barkley, and I love Chuck. That's my guy. But trashing the Warriors once again, which, as you're about to find out, he kind of has a history of doing this. I'll talk about that later in the show. And also, I'm looking forward to this towards the end. Bailey Zappe, Mac Jones. You guys know I'm not a Mac Jones guy in the slightest. The gap between the two is minuscule. As Albert Breer reported, talking about the New England Patriots and what they believe internally about their quarterback situation and the possibility they could move on from Mac Jones after or during this offseason. I'll get to that later in today's show. But first, breaking news. Aaron Rodgers has emerged from his darkness retreat. He is back. The four-time MVP, of course, took a darkness retreat in Oregon, according to Adam Schefter, who was all over this situation. Appreciate Schefter. He said that Rodgers has emerged from his darkness retreat, according to the owner of the facility in Southern Oregon, where the Packers quarterback has spent the last several days and nights. The room in which Aaron Rodgers spent his time in a partially underground hobbit-like structure with 300 square feet of space, devoid of light, with a queen bed and a bathroom and a meditation-like mat on the floor. So Aaron Rodgers is out from the dark. So everybody's speculating, okay, so what is this going to mean for Aaron Rodgers? Well, I mean, I don't think it's going to have nearly as much significance as people think. I mean, what did the ayahuasca do? If nothing else, the ayahuasca actually made him worse. He didn't have a single 300-yard passing game last year, but that's neither here nor there. But what will Aaron Rodgers do in the coming weeks? Free agency starts in today's February 23rd, so we're talking two and a half weeks here, and we've got free agency, and so we'll assume that Rodgers will make his decision at that point because it'll really determine who the Packers go with moving forward at quarterback and who they trade, because a report came out today, I believe from the NFL Network, that Jordan Love will ask out of Green Bay if the Packers roll with Rodgers for this year, because he's like, man, I've been sitting 3 years. I'm ready to go. I'm a first-round pick. I want to play. And so you understand that perspective from Jordan Love. My prediction, after thinking about it, I think he ends up in New York Jet. And depending on what the trade looks like, you assume the Packers will get multiple first-round picks. They very well might even get a starter from the Jets. Who knows? But I can see a scenario in which Green Bay maybe fleeces New York. I'll explain why. There's a report that came out a week ago that said the Packers are, quote, disgusted with Aaron Rodgers and his sort of, let's just put it, odd behavior off the field. And I think it's interesting that the word disgusted is used because this is nothing different than what's been the case the last 2 or 3 years. With some of his odd things he tends to do in the offseason. But that's fine as long as you're winning MVPs and getting us 13 wins into the NFC Championship game every year, or at least deep into the playoffs every year. They'll look past that. I mean, listen, what's the old saying about production and tolerance? Like, you'll put up with enough if your guy is producing, even if he tends to be a liability in terms of leadership for your organization and for the locker room. But Once you get to the point now where Aaron Rodgers is, look at just about every number, yards, touchdowns, completion percentage, passer rating, is smack dab in the middle of the pack among NFL starting quarterbacks last year, failed, as I said, to throw for 300 yards, and most importantly, failed to get his team into the playoffs. In a conference where Daniel Jones made it, Geno Smith made it. I mean, what are we talking about? And a 45-year-old Tom Brady made it as well. And Kirk Cousins, by the way, won the division easily. Matter of fact, you finished third in your division behind the upcoming up and start Detroit Lions. So that's all to be taken in consideration. So from Green Bay's perspective, and there are other reports say that they love Jordan Love, no pun intended. They think the kid has a chance to be really, really good. And we saw flashes last year, when he got an opportunity to play, when I said they should have sat Rodgers when they were 4-8 and let Jordan Love take the reins. They did not, and they did not make the playoffs as I predicted. But the point being, they were sitting in a position where, okay, we've got something in Jordan Love, or they are sitting in a position rather. We've got something in Jordan Love, we think. We've got some young receivers we like. Christian Watson, right? He came on the second half of the season. Aaron Jones took a pay cut to stay in Green Bay. A.J. Dillon is one of the best bruising running backs of the league. You still got an elite offensive line. The defense, while some improvements need to be made, they had their moments, especially those last 5 games of the year. They held one of the best offenses of the league, the Detroit Lions, in that last game of the year to 20. Problem is the offense only gave them 16. They lost the game and lost a shot at the playoffs. It's like, we have a lot to be optimistic about. There's no way Minnesota is going to be as good next year as they were. Chicago is an absolute train wreck. And Detroit, we'll see. I mean, Detroit's stock is as high as it's been in a long time, but it is Detroit. Like, there's always a lot of uncertainty there, and they're certainly not as well run a franchise as Green Bay is. Green Bay's got all the leverage. On the Jets side of things, they are desperate for a franchise quarterback. You guys know I love Derek Carr. I think Derek Carr is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. I've always been a Derek Carr fan. But when you got the Jets saying, hey, Derek, according to Diana Rossini of ESPN, hey, Derek, you're going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer if you get on the Jets. Now, listen, you'll say crazy things to get somebody to buy into what you're selling. But that's pushing it. I love Derek Carr. He is not going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He may make the Hall of Fame one day. I'm not discounting that at all, especially if he gets himself involved with a stable organization. First ballot, that's reserved for like the pantheon, like the all-time great quarterbacks. And as much as I love Derek Carr, that's not going to be where he's at. Aaron Rodgers will be, but he's on the back end of his career. Jets need Aaron. Packers don't. So with all the assets that the Jets have in terms of draft picks, in terms of young talent, and Green Bay sitting there like, man, we've got the best asset in the NFL. We've got the best trading piece in the NFL. If you look at what what the Seattle Seahawks got in that trade with the Denver Broncos for Russell Wilson, I mean, a haul. What the Kansas City Chiefs got in return for Tyreek Hill, Green Bay's sitting there. Listen, I've criticized their upper management before, but they're not idiots. They're sitting back and saying, man, we could get minimum 2-3 first-round picks, maybe a couple second-rounders. Hey, we could steal a starter from the Jets. I think that's what's going to happen. I think it would be a horrendous move for the Jets. An up-and-coming team. You've got all of these young players, all of these young, really good players headlined by guys like Sauce Gardner and company. And you give it all away for what? 2 years max of Aaron Rodgers. Aaron has been very vocal. He does not want to play as long as Tom Brady. He said that on numerous occasions. I don't want to play until my mid-40s. Heck, he's been talking about retirement for 2 years. But desperate franchises, even if they do, seem to take a turn for the better, which the Jets obviously have under Joe Douglas. And I think Robert Saleh is a solid head coach. It often turns back into, that's the same old Jets. And it's the Packers. We're like, well, of course the Packers are back into a contending spot. By the way, for Green Bay, from their perspective, they're like, we could get 8-9 wins with Jordan Love and not paying him $50 million a year. We get the opportunity. We've developed him for 3 years. Let's see what he's got. Let's build around him. Exercise his fifth-year option. All of a sudden, Green Bay's looking great. As for the Jets, not the case. So all that to say, that feels like the only spot. I know people are suggesting Vegas. My question is, what does Vegas trade? Like they have very minimal assets and they have no cap space. They freed some of it up with Derek Carr, but you bring in Aaron Rodgers' contract and that negates all of that. So, I mean, they did not have enough money to fire Josh McDaniels. That's how bad it was. So, listen, you could try it, New York. I warn against it. I would still say go after Derek Carr first and foremost because you don't have to give up anything to get Derek. And secondly, go get Lamar Jackson via a trade, should he be franchise tagged by the Baltimore Ravens, or in free agency if the Ravens decide not to match a possible Jets offer. Lamar and Derek are both younger, more committed. Lamar's won the playoffs and won an MVP, which Aaron Rodgers has. Derek Carr is not, but come on, he's playing for the freaking Raiders for 9 years with the best defense he ever had was like 20th. Forgot what year it was. Might have been like 2016, I think. So be careful what you wish for if you're the New York Jets. As for the Packers, I think this is the easiest decision in the world. Because now you trade Aaron, you buy into Jordan Love. If he's not what you think he is, okay, you start over and you move on. I mean, you can't just go from Hall of Fame quarterback Brett Favre to Hall of Fame quarterback Aaron Rodgers. I'm not saying Jordan Love's not going to be a Hall of Famer. I don't know what he's going to be. I've only seen him play a game and a half, basically. That game a couple of years back against Kansas City, and then that half against Philadelphia when Aaron Rodgers got hurt. That's all we've got. So I don't know what he's going to be. At least try and find out, which is the case I made at the end of last season. But now you can go into 2023 with that outlook. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Packers handle this and how the Jets handle this, because I think that feels like the only logical destination in terms of what the two teams are looking for. Green Bay's looking for draft picks. They're looking to build around a quarterback, which they can't do, especially with the guy who's now going to be age 39 by the time next season rolls around. The Jets just need a franchise quarterback. Aaron obviously feels that need, but for what, a year, 2 years? That's not worth giving up all your assets for. We'll see. I think the worst case scenario is if if the Packers bring Rodgers back, because now he loses all trade value. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But, darkness retreat. Listen, each their own. I've said that about Aaron Rodgers for a long time. Like, his methods are his methods. Everybody has their own process. I think it's odd to say the least. Minimum, it's got to be terrible for your eyes. I think the initial reports were 4 days. I don't know if Aaron stayed in Oregon for exactly 4 days, less, more. I have no idea. But it seemed like once you come into life, that'd be kind of brutal for your eyes. But what do I know? I've never done a 4-day darkness retreat in Southern Oregon. So in a Hobbit-style home, I think is what the report said. Let's talk about another quarterback involving New York with the New York Giants, who's going to be a free agent this year, and that is Daniel Jones, as some of his fans know him as Danny Dimes, who, according to multiple reports, is asking for $45 million a year and recently fired his agent. So he's saying, if you can't get it, I'm going to find somebody else that can. Now, from Daniel Jones' perspective, I respect it. You get all the money that you can. You see where the market is trending in terms of what quarterbacks are making nowadays. Considering the fact what Joe Burrow is going to get, I mean, Joe's going to get in excess of $50 million. Herbert's going to get about the same. Lamar could get paid. Jalen Hurts is going to get paid. Like, that's 4 guys that are going to be making in excess of $50 million. And so Daniel Jones is like, what's $45 million? From the Giants' perspective, it's a different story, though. Because the New York Giants, I think it's safe to say, were, I don't want to say the surprise team, but one of the 2 or 3 shockers in the NFL. You go from irrelevant 4-win team, disaster general manager and coach, you bring in Brian Dable, and year 1 he gets you to the playoffs and wins a playoff game on the road against a solid Vikings team before they obviously got mollywopped by the eventual NFC champion Eagles. But what I think is mind-blowing, and to me, this is an easy decision for the Giants. Easy. Who has proven themselves to be more valuable in the National Football League, Daniel Jones or Brian Dable? Because I saw Daniel Jones pre-Brian Dable. was a turnover machine, struggled in the red zone. Yards per attempt was not great. It's gone down in recent years. Completion percentage isn't great, and passer rating was simply awful. Not to mention he had a losing record in the league. He still has a losing record in the league and had yet to make the playoffs in the weaker NFC. Brian Daboll, on the other hand, Josh Allen's best years were with him as his offensive coordinator. 2020, Josh Allen finished second for MVP behind Aaron Rodgers. 2021, we all remember that classic duel between Mahomes and Allen, both quarterbacks going up and down the field. Mahomes has Andy Reid as his play caller. Josh Allen has Brian Daboll as his play caller. Josh Allen regressed in 2022 now, didn't he? Without Brian Daboll, after he bolted cross-state. I'm sorry, not cross-state, but to the other state, to New Jersey, to go to the New York Giants. Brian Daboll's a made man. Giants know, okay, we've got our guy. We have got our head coach. We still don't know if we have our quarterback, even though we are certain we have our coach. Hello, this should be kind of easy. Let me pull up a chart of the quarterbacks making $40 million annually as of today. So here it is. Sorry for the podcast audience. I'll read it off for you. Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Matthew Stafford, Dak Prescott. Those are the quarterbacks, the 8 quarterbacks making $40 million a year. Now, Aaron is making 50. And again, we anticipate that guys like Burrow, Herbert, and Hurts are going to make in excess of that. We'll see what the status of Lamar Jackson is. I'll talk probably more about that tomorrow. But assuming Lamar eventually gets his deal, it will certainly exceed $50 million. What he's focused on is the guaranteed money, but that's a different conversation for a different show. What do those 8 quarterbacks have in common? Again, I'll put it back up if you want me to talk along with this. All 8, for at least one season, at least one, they've either put together a fantastic statistical year where their numbers are out the window, they've had a great playoff run, or in the case of some of them, Rodgers, Russell, Mahomes is just the best quarterback in football, but that's a different conversation, but sustained success over the course of a long period of time. So I put in that category Rodgers, Wilson, Mahomes. In terms of young talents who are like, holy cow, this is the future of the league, I'd put Josh Allen and I'd put Kyler Murray in that group. As for Deshaun Watson, obviously we understand what his legal situation is, but in terms of what he did in Houston before the trade to Cleveland, 2020, he might have been the best quarterback statistically in the NFL. His passer rating was through the no. I mean, it was crazy. For Dak Prescott, similar situation. His numbers not quite as impressive as Watson, but had an incredible 2020 season before getting hurt and a remarkable 2021 season in which he broke the Cowboys record for passing touchdowns in a franchise that's had Romo, Staubach, and Aikman. And as for Matthew Stafford, in his case, yeah, he's put up the great numbers, but he would not have gotten $40 million a year annually had he not led the Rams to a Super Bowl a year ago. So for all 8, we don't love the contracts. I mean, the Russell Wilson contract, first and foremost, looks horrendous. We'll see what he does with Sean Payton now. The Deshaun Watson contract, we're like, oh gosh, did you see those 6 games in Cleveland? Albeit, he's coming back from 2 years off in the league. We'll see what he looks like next year. And Kyler Murray, oh god, he regressed badly from 2021 to 2022. Josh Allen had a down year. Dak Prescott had an interception problem this year, as did Matthew Stafford. We don't love some of these contracts, but the market is what it is. At some point or another, all of them have proved, they're top 10 caliber quarterbacks. In the case of guys like Mahomes, Allen, we debate, or Rodgers as well. There's been points in time, are they the best quarterback? What is the justification for Daniel Jones? Yeah, he led the New York Giants to the playoffs, right? He threw 15 touchdowns. 15 touchdowns. Yards per attempt went down from his career high from 2020. Yeah, he could run, he can move, he can scramble. And I think he's a solid starter. Don't think he's a franchise guy. But one playoff win, in one appearance, automatically gets you $45 million when you were awful pre-Brian Dable? For the record, Davis Webb, who was just hired to be the quarterback's coach, I forgot where it was. Was it? I think it might have been with the Giants or somebody. He got hired by to be their quarterback coach. Do you watch Davis Mills, who I don't think had ever played in an NFL game before, certainly never started an NFL game before, against the Philadelphia Eagles starters? Looked okay. I mean, you know, they were moving the ball down the field. That game was so close, Philly had the onside kick. If you remember that game, Philly had to win the game in order to win the NFC East and clinch the number 1 seed. At home, Giants played their backups and almost beat them. I'm sorry, I said Davis Mills, Davis Webb. Davis Webb had a QBR of 73 in that game. Against the best defense of football. Daniel Jones didn't do that. A lot of other quarterbacks didn't do that. And now am I saying Davis Webb is better than Daniel Jones? No, of course I'm not. What I am saying is that Brian Dable is one of the great coaches in the NFL. And there's a lot of quarterbacks he could make work. Again, you saw Josh Allen. And nothing against Ken Dorsey, the new OC of the Bills. Ken Dorsey is not Brian Dable. The drastic decline. Now, Josh Allen is still one of the league's 5 best quarterbacks, unquestionably. But the decline from 2021 to 2022 was like, oh my God, like they really missed Dable. Like Josh Allen, a big issue of his was turnovers. Dable kind of reined that in. And Dable leaves and the turnovers start to come back. The undisciplined football comes back. Meanwhile, Daniel Jones has had the best season of his career. You see a little connection here? So this is easy to me if I'm the Giants. They're in a position where they've got momentum coming off of last season. Made the playoffs, won a playoff game on the road against Minnesota. They obviously have glaring needs at wide receiver. They've got to address that. Darius Slayton is not going to get the job done. Nice player, good slot guy. He's not a number 1. I'm not even sure he's a number 2. You got Saquon. We'll see how long that lasts. We all know that a running back's shelf life is not very long. An offensive line that needs improvements, but got better when Dable took over, when his coaching staff took over. A defense that, as I've said for a while now, is really underrated. Takes the ball away, is solid in the red zone. Now you just need a quarterback to patch that up. Again, if I'm the Giants today, I'm like, I'm moving on from Dave. If he's going to continue to command $45 million, I'm moving on for him. Hey, Derek Carr, how would you like to come over here? Yeah, the Jets are, they got all these flashy players. They got this momentum. Hey, Derek, we just made the playoffs. Hey, Derek, we can maybe go get DeAndre Hopkins. We've got a superstar running back. We've got just as good, if not better, an offensive line in the easier conference. By the way, it make more sense for the Raiders because they wouldn't be trading. I'm sorry. My bad. Vegas isn't trading him. My bad. Take that off the table. But Derek doesn't have, if he goes to the Giants, he doesn't have to go through Mahomes and Burrow and Allen and Herbert and Lawrence. He has to go through Hurts, Dak, whoever the Niners quarterback is. More about the Niners roster and coaching staff than it is the quarterback at this particular junction. I mean, Aaron Rodgers for the time being, although I anticipate he'll be out of there soon. I mean, these are not like juggernauts that we're talking about, the quarterbacks. I mean, Jared Goff, I like Jared Goff, but he's definitely not even close to the level of the guys in the AFC. I mean, if I'm the Giants, I'm making that move today. Move on from Daniel Jones. Go to Derek Carr. You say we can't move on from a guy who made the playoffs. Why not? Rams moved off to Jared Goff, and he lost the He got to the Super Bowl 2 years ago. You're not good enough. We're going to bring in Matthew Stafford and have that pay off. They got a ring to show for it. Not saying the Giants get a ring by signing Derek Carr and moving off of Daniel Jones, but teams do this frequently. Move off of okay quarterbacks who have really been elevated by great coaching staffs, getting an upgrade, and they go much further. I mean, sign Derek Carr today. You have all that salary cap space from not having to pay Daniel Jones. All of a sudden, hey, we got money to spend. Maybe we can go get a DeAndre Hopkins, who's frustrated in Arizona and is going to be traded, is on the trading block as we speak. We can continue to draft well. I mean, is it a coincidence that most quarterbacks had their best years under Brian Daboll? Like, he's starting to build a reputation as like the NFL version of Lincoln Riley at this point. I'm serious. I mean, the improvements that quarterbacks make when he's at the helm is incredible, either as the OC or the head coach. So, I mean, I think this is an obvious decision for the Giants. People saying franchise tag, that takes up cap space, and it puts you in, you know, it's like the friend zone. You know, they talk about the friend zone. That's what they would be in with their quarterback. Like, they don't know if they want to pursue this long term or if they just like Daniel Jones, but they don't love him long term. And for Daniel, he's like, man, I want to get my money, but I'm trapped in this franchise tag, which, I mean, I've always said I despise the franchise tag. I think it's when the new CBA comes up, I don't think it's going to happen, but I wish both sides would agree to get rid of it. But I don't think this is a decision. I mean, again, I'll pull up the quarterbacks that are making $40 million. Some of them were like Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, but most of these guys at some point or another have shown flashes like, wait, this dude could win a Super Bowl. All of these guys have shown that. Some of them have won. Rodgers has won. Wilson has won. Mahomes has won. Stafford has won. Obviously, Kyler, Deshaun, and Josh haven't. Kyler, Deshaun, Dak, and Josh haven't. But for Daniel Jones being that group, especially with Burrow, Herbert coming down the pipeline along with Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, and then next year it's going to be Trevor Lawrence. I mean, I'm skeptical at best. I think this is an obvious move for the Giants. Like Daniel Jones as a starter, as a transition piece, not as my franchise guy. Not as the guy who's going to take me and go win a Super Bowl. I think this is a pretty easy decision if you're the New York Giants, but we'll see. But, you know, listen, props to the Giants, props to their front office in terms of the moves that they've made over the past couple of years to try and make Daniel Jones' job easier, to play to his strengths. And that's ultimately what coaching is. It's making the game easier and simpler, or as easy and simple as it could be. It's the NFL. It's professional football. But that's what separates the good coaches from the great coaches. And I think Brian Daboll, year one, I think he's proven to be a great coach. His track record as an OC, particularly in Buffalo, tells you that. And with the Giants, obviously, he won Coach of the Year. I think deservedly so, with all due respect to Pete Carroll and Kyle Shanahan, and I forgot who else was nominated for Coach of the Year. But with all due respect to those guys, that was an easy one. Got Daniel Jones to the playoffs, won a playoff game. Hey, salute to you, man. That is not easy stuff to do. But I do want to move to the NBA a little bit. And like I said, at the end of today's show, I'm going to be doing my pretenders and contenders for this stretch run of the NBA regular season. It's not the halfway point. Most teams are almost 60 games into the season. We only got 20 plus games to go, 23, 24, depending on who your favorite team is. And again, we definitely like the obvious contender. I mean, spoiler alert, I'm going to have Boston as a contender. Like, they made the finals last year and they're better this year. They're obviously. We know who the good teams are, but the in-between teams is who's hard to figure out. So stay tuned for that later in today's show. At the end of today's show, rather. I do want to shift the NBA, though, and I want to talk about one of the greatest players that ever did it, that ever laced him up, and one of the great television personalities, forget in basketball, but in sports, and that is Sir Charles Barkley. Chuck, as he's known. The Chuckster, as Ernie calls him. The great Ernie Johnson, the Hall of Famer. All those guys are in the Hall of Fame. He's never going to learn, is he? And I love Chuck. But this was during the All-Star game. TBS did an alternate broadcast of the All-Star game with the Inside the NBA crew, Ernie, Shaq, Kenny, and Charles, and Draymond Green was a part of the broadcast as well. And when the conversation revolving contenders, again, to stay tuned for the end of today's show, I'll give you my contenders and pretenders. As that conversation started to take place, Charles Barkley, to say the least, made his thoughts very well known about what he thinks about the Golden State Warriors. Take a listen.
Really, that said, but the Golden State Warriors are cooked. That's crazy. You said that last year, but we all know you don't know what you're talking about.
I didn't say that last year. No, I did not say that last year.
You said it every year.
No,
you said it every year since I've been in the league.
That's not true. But y'all are cooked now.
Are we?
Yep, y'all are done.
Okay, so Chuck thinks that the Warriors are done. Well, this has been pretty frequent, as we here in Dub Nation would know. But for those that are maybe not aware of this, I will educate you on the fact that Charles Barkley, who we know, if you get the guarantee outside of the 2021 playoffs when he was shockingly accurate on his guarantees, you don't want that for your favorite team. 2015, when the Warriors dynasty was in its infancy. They hadn't won a championship yet, but they were the best team in the NBA in the regular season and were, about to make a playoff run. And Charles Barkley somewhat famously said, quote, "Jump shooting teams don't win championships." It's interesting. And they, of course, proceeded to win the championship that year. In 2016, Western Conference Finals, which TNT did that year. It was a phenomenal series. Remember OKC, Golden State? It was KD's last series ever as an OKC Thunder. OKC's up 3-1. Golden State comes back, obviously, to eventually blow through and lead themselves in the finals. Finals aside, Chuck picked the Thunder coming into the series, obviously stuck with the Thunder. Who wouldn't? Up 3-1. And even after Golden State wins games 5 and 6, sticks with OKC in Game 7 in Oracle Arena, and Golden State obviously wins. So that's 0 for 2 for Sir Charles. In 2017, he picked the Los Angeles Clippers. This is the Lob City Clippers. Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, Doc Rivers is the head coach. He picked them to win the Western Conference over the Golden State Warriors. That it did not happen. As a matter of fact, that Warriors team is one that I consider the greatest of all time because they went 16-1 in the playoffs, including a 15-0 start, and swept the whole Western Conference. Swept the Western Conference. 12-0. Led 3-0 against the Cavs, won the series in a gentleman's sweep in 5 games. So that's 0 for 3. In 2019. No, I'm sorry, 2018. Western Conference Finals. He picks the Houston Rockets to beat the Golden State Warriors. Warriors obviously beat Houston in 7 games. 2019, going into the Western Conference Finals, he picked, yes, this is an actual thing, the Portland Trailblazers. Apparently, Charles was not aware of the fact that coming into that series, and this fact is still true to this day, Damian Lillard has never won a playoff game. Forget series, game against one Steph Curry. He was 0-6 at that time. After that series, he was 0-10 because the Warriors swept the Blazers out of the playoffs. In that same year, in a clip that I actually played for my show that I did the day after my Warriors won the championship, June 17th, 2022. You can go check that out. But I started the show with about 2.5, 3-minute clip of just a basketball analyst declaring the Warriors dead for the last 3-4 years. Charles Barkley was on that. He said, quote, "The Warriors have no chance without Kevin Durant. He made them a dynasty." Kevin Durant made the Warriors a dynasty. Of course, he left and they won the finals in 2022, a finals in which he picked, you guessed it, the Boston Celtics. So to say that I'm excited that Charles Barkley is once again picking against my Golden State Warriors, it thrills me. I'm excited. I'm like, hey, listen, we're sitting as the 9 seed. Obviously, the Warriors play the Lakers tonight. No Steph, although he's going to be back soon, thank God. And Andrew Wiggins, who's, happy birthday, Andrew Wiggins, by the way, but reportedly he's away from the team for personal reasons. Obviously, prayers to Wiggs and hope everything in the situation's okay. But the Warriors sitting at 9th in the West, 29-29. Hasn't gone exactly well. Injuries haven't gone their way. They haven't been good on the road. And I think Charles Barkley might have awakened the beast, not by motivating the Warriors. Warriors aren't motivated for the regular season. There's nothing that anybody could say any of these talking heads could say, oh, that's going to wake the Warriors up. Warriors understand. They've been doing this. They've been dancing this dance for a long time, longer than anybody currently in the NBA. They know it's all about mid-April to mid-June. That's all that matters. At the end of the day, that's what makes legacies. That's what cements you as the greatest teams and the greatest individual players. That's what gets guys paid in the long run. Look at the money that Otto Porter Jr. got paid by the Toronto Raptors. Gary Payton II with the Portland Trail Blazers before coming back to Golden State, by the way. They understand what this is about. That's the way the game is played. But I just don't... I'm using this point to say, not just Chuck individually, but just the mass media at large. At what point is the media going to learn, betting against Golden State usually doesn't pay off in the end? Usually doesn't. When they're loaded, fully healthy, keep in mind that in every single series in which the Warriors, Big Three, the three amigos as I call them from time to time, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, in series in which all three start every single game, they've never lost. They've never lost a playoff series in which Curry, Thompson, and Green start the whole series. Not to mention a stat that I think is even more impressive. Steve Kerr, he's been to the playoffs 6 times as the Warriors head coach. He's undefeated in Western Conference series. His only 2, and not just his 2, the Warrior in this dynasty run, their only 2 postseason losses are to, the greatest player of all time in LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers in 2016. And in 2019, in which basically their whole roster fell apart. Steph was hurt. Klay got hurt. Missed game 3. Missed the rest of game 6 after tearing his ACL. Boogie Cousins was hurt. Andre Iguodala was hurt. KD played all of 12 minutes in that series. They physically fell apart against the Toronto Raptors. That's not to take credit away from Toronto. But Golden State was not Golden State in that series. That's the only 2 postseason losses. Every other series, they've won. Every team that's been in their way outside of Cleveland. Because Toronto, while a threat, let's be real, would not have beaten Golden State if Golden State was healthy. Heck, I to this day believe if Klay starts that series start to finish and does not get hurt at any juncture, the Warriors win the finals without Kevin Durant. Cleveland's the only team that's proven, we can stare these dudes in the face. And in 1 year, we made them flinch. We took them down in 2016. Everybody else, forget about that. That's why teams like Memphis, that's why teams like the Clippers, forget that. Golden State's seen this before in the form of the Houston Rockets, in the form of the Portland Trail Blazers, in the form of the Memphis Grizzlies in a different iteration back in 2015, in the Grindhouse with Gasol, Conley, Zach Randolph, Big Zebo, Tony Allen, who to me is still the greatest on-ball defender of any guard in the history of the NBA, with all due respect to Gary Payton. And other great guards, Tony Allen was different. They've seen this before. So for Charles Barkley, just write him off like that, a bit too premature. Even for one of the greats. That's listen, Draymond, you heard Draymond in that clip. Man, you ain't got no rings. And obviously you hear Shaq say that from time to time. Listen, is it a blemish on Charles' resume that he doesn't have rings? I mean, I think so. Does it diminish his greatness? Absolutely not. He's absolutely one of the 50 greatest players of all time. Folks, Charles Barkley won an MVP in the 1990s in Michael Jordan's era. That's not easy to do. He won an MVP in Michael Jordan's era. Faced him off in the finals and played well in that series. Took the Bulls 6 games back in, I think it was 1993, which was the end of the first three-peat. Charles Barkley was a monster. He was probably second or third best player of the 90s. I mean, 90s start to finish. I mean, Shaq's in that discussion, but Shaq didn't win any championships in the 90s. Karl Malone, John Stockton, you could put in that discussion. Hakeem, I'd say probably Hakeem is second to Michael. Second thought, Hakeem Olajuwon second to Michael Jordan as far as greatest players of the 90s. Chuck's in that discussion for third. So, but with that said, with as great as he was, and as great as he is still as an analyst, yeah, way, way too early to be writing off the greatest dynasty in NBA history since those 90 Chicago Bulls, who got him in 1993 and who got a lot of teams in the 1990s. John Rivera, who is a Bulls fan from the Fan Perspective podcast, shout out to John. He says, what you talking about, Willis? Shout out John. Shout out Fan Perspective. You got to check out their stuff. Although John, who's also a Jets fan, by the way, he's much higher on the prospects of an Aaron Rodgers trade than I am in terms of not the possibility whether it happen. I told you at the beginning of the show, I think it's going to happen. I just think it'd be franchise suicide for the Jets. Go at Derek Carr. Does Derek Carr give you the upside Rodgers does? Nope. But he gives you more time, saves you more money, and you get to keep your assets. You get to keep your draft picks. You get to keep your young players. And by the way, today, who's better? I'm dead serious. Who's better, Carr or Rodgers? Today. I'm just saying. Just throwing that out there. Rodgers is with one of the most stable organizations in sports. Derek Carr was with one of the most unstable organizations in sports. I'm just throwing that out there. But I'll tell you this. There's an organization that we once deemed stable, and I still think has good ownership, which I will get to in just a second. John says, I hear a 3 and a 1. Oh, that's not going to be, he says no players. That is not going to be enough to get Aaron Rodgers. That's because Green Bay is in the leverage spot. They've got a young quarterback. They've got a situation that they've got young talent on their roster. They've got, as I said earlier in the show, they've got the best trade asset in all of football. And they're looking at what the Broncos got for Russ, different position, but what the Dolphins got for a receiver, Tyreek Hill. Like, man, multiple first, and, again, Seattle got some starters. I'm sorry, what Seattle got for Russ. I keep saying what Denver got for Russ. What Seattle got for Russell Wilson in that trade. The Packers gonna be commanding something similar to that kind of package. A 3 and a 1. There's no way. Like that's a trade. That's a trade, John, that would get Derek Carr, I think. And while I'm higher on Derek Carr than I am on Aaron Rodgers, which is I think I'm in the minority in that opinion. Most people still are high on Aaron Rodgers, so there's no. If that comes out, like if in a couple of weeks, breaking news: Packers trade Aaron Rodgers to the New York Jets for a first round for a 2023 first and a 2023 third, I'd be like, man, they got fleeced. And Green Bay rarely gets fleeced in trades. That's not their brand. I criticize the front office for being too conservative in the draft, in free agency. But again, they're not stupid. John Rivera, Carr is a free agent, so won't cost nothing but money, which is my point. But I'm saying, sort of what I was saying though, a 3 and a 1. If Derek Carr was available for trade, that's about what it would take to get him, considering his market, where the Jets are at as it pertains to their quarterback situation. But all the more reason, John, to me, to go get Derek Carr. You don't have to give up anything, and you're paying him less than what Aaron Rodgers is going to make, and he's going to be around longer than Aaron Rodgers, and you have the leadership qualities, the commitment to football, which I'm not so sure where that's at with Aaron at this particular moment in time. Again, you got Darkness Retreats Ayahuasca last year. Derek Carr is mostly focused on football. John says, I like Carr. Giving Rodgers till Monday, then go for Carr. Okay. I respect that. I could, again, that's first we got to see what Aaron thought about his Darkness Retreat. So I highly doubt something gets done by Monday. Because what's going to happen, first thing we got to do or hear is Rodgers on the Pat McAfee show this coming Tuesday, talking about his experience. It'll. One thing I always give Aaron Rodgers. He creates great content for people like me. he makes my job as a podcaster and people out in the media with radio shows, YouTube shows, and TV shows. Man, he makes our job so easy. So I appreciate him for that aspect. Like Tim Duncan to me is the 6th greatest basketball player to ever. Tim Duncan didn't create any content whatsoever. The only time you ever, back in the day, you used to talk about Tim Duncan is if either he won an MVP, which he won 2 of them, to his credit, or if he had a monster game in the playoffs or in the finals. Like that was, no. Like Aaron's one of those athletes, when he plays great, we talk a lot about him. When he plays bad, we talk a lot about him. And if he's somewhere in between, we still talk about him. So, listen, I'm not complaining. John just says, well, till Tuesday. But hey, he may announce it on the McAfee show for all we know. We'll just have to see. But again, speaking of organizations that we thought were well run, and probably were at the time, and seem to be in a little bit of disarray nowadays. Let's talk about the New England Patriots. So there was a very, very interesting report pertaining to the New England Patriots, talking about their quarterback situation. I thought it was very, very interesting. Because what's interesting about when we discuss these young quarterbacks, and as I talked about with Daniel Jones earlier, when it's time to start making a decision, all of a sudden we start to be like, well, and we start to list the things that we don't necessarily like about them. And again, for a guy like Daniel Jones, as I said earlier in the show, I think giving $40 million to him would be absurd. Beyond absurd. It'd be crazy. But we know he's at least been productive. He's had his moments from time to time. A guy who has had minimal great moments, at least I would say, is Mac Jones. You guys know I've never been high on Mac Jones. I remember vividly on my show, I was still an audio-only show at the time. I was not on YouTube. But I remember saying on my show after Alabama won the 2021 National Championship, and the Mac Jones hype was starting to begin. I was like, y'all think he's a top 3? I remember they were talking about, hey, could this guy be the 3rd overall pick in the draft? I'm like, have y'all lost your marbles? Apparently so, because Mac Jones almost went number 3 to the San Francisco 49ers. They decided to take Trey Lance, and you guys know I love Trey Lance out of that draft. I'm still willing to give him a shot, although I'm not quite ready to sell my stock. I'm getting close, and it's certainly going to sell for much less than what I bought it for, but that's neither here nor there. The Patriots eventually took Mac Jones with the 15th overall pick. Well, Albert Breer, who's the Monday morning quarterback, he's a great reporter. I think he's one of those guys that you talk about with. He's on a lot of these ESPN shows, Fox. He does a great job for in terms of reporting. The Monday morning quarterback is who he's with. And do we have the article here? Yes. So he was talking to some Boston radio show. And he was asked if he believes New England could trade away Mac Jones if they felt that there was a better option, or if the price is right. They traded Mac and they thought the price was right. He said, quote, I think they would. Internally, I don't know if they see this massive gap between Mac Jones and Bailey Zappe. I'm not saying they think Bailey's as good as Mac, but there was some element of Bailey doing what he was coached to do last year that I think gave Bailey the edge to some degree for a little while there. So I think it'll be interesting to see what would happen if a real offer came along. I don't think a real offer is going to come along, but it'd be interesting to see what would happen if a real offer did come along. Well, it's very, very interesting. It's funny you bring that up, Albert, because you guys know when Bailey Zappe came into the lineup, I was like, hang on a minute. There's an element to Bailey Zappe's game that Mac Jones didn't really possess. And as time went on, I ended up being right. So let's take a look real quick. As soon as I get this graphic up, here we go. All right. For some reason, this Bailey Zappe graphic was not available. I thought I had it ready on the show earlier today. I got it ready, but it's funny that Albert Breer brings up this gap between Mac Jones and between Bailey Zappe, because Albert Breer says he doesn't see a gap between the two. You know what's funny about that? Neither do I. Let's look at the numbers, shall we? Let's look at Bailey Zappe. He started 2 games this season for the New England Patriots. They were against the Detroit Lions and the Cleveland Browns. Let's look at Bailey Zappe's numbers. 248 yards a game, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, had a passer rating of 109, 73% completion percentage, and team points per game. The team averaged 33 points per game in his 2 starts. I'm like, well, that's pretty good, Bryson. What about Mac Jones? Well, let's not look at the averages. I'm going to be fair to Mac Jones. I'm not going to look at his worst games with his best games with his in-between games. Let's just talk about Mac Jones with that same bad offensive coordinator, who's really a defensive coordinator, who's Matt Patricia. And let's look at him, with those same receivers that Bailey Zappe had and all of the variables that came into play. Let's look at Mac Jones' 2 best games. They came against the Vikings on Thanksgiving Day and the Cincinnati Bengals on Christmas Eve. Apparently, Mac Jones likes playing on the holidays. Let's look at Mac Jones' 2 best starts of 2022. 311 yards a game, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions to his credit. Passer rating of 112, 68% completion percentage, 22 team points per game. Not a big gap. Now, in terms of yards, there's a decent amount of separation to get Bailey Zappe with 248 yards, Mac Jones with 311. But Mac Jones 4 touchdowns to Zappe's 3. Mac Jones 0 interceptions to Zappe's 1. Mac's 112 passer rating to Bailey's 109. Matter of fact, Bailey Zappe's completion percentage in that stretch was better than Mac's, over 70%. Mac Jones was sub 70%. And then team points per game, it wasn't even close. Team averaged 22 with Mac at quarterback. They averaged 33. Basically almost 5 touchdowns a game with Bailey Zappe at the helm. Very interesting. We talk about the gap. We talk about all the things that come into consideration when you're deciding on a franchise quarterback. And I said, when he played as well as he did against the Cleveland Browns, I said, that's their guy for the rest of the season. Now, for the record, do I think Bailey Zappe is their long-term answer at quarterback? I do not. I think he is a good backup. Today, it's kind of like the Packers with Aaron Rodgers. I like what I see from Jordan Love, but there's not enough of a sample size to really know. Same with the Patriots. I liked everything I saw with Bailey Zappe. For a rookie 4th-round pick out of Eastern Kentucky, I believe it was, to do what he did. He came in relief for Brian Hoyer, did a solid job. Okay, the yards weren't great, neither was completion percentage, but went toe-to-toe with the great Aaron Rodgers at Lambeau. Won the next 2 games, one on the road against Detroit. One at home against Detroit, one on the road against Cleveland. Came in relief for Mac Jones, the Patriots trailing 14-zip, led back-to-back scoring drives. Now, in fairness, he struggled in the second half. He was turning the ball over. But when Albert Breer says he does not believe the Patriots find a significant gap between Bailey Zappe and Mac Jones, I think the stats back it up pretty accurately. I think your eyes back it up pretty accurately. Again, Mac Jones, 311 yards per game in his best 2 starts of 2022. 4 touchdowns, no picks, a 112 passer rating, 68% completion percentage, 22 team points per game. Bailey Zappe, 248 yards a game, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, passer rating of 109, completion percentage 73%, team points per game 33. There's some categories where Zappe is significantly better, such as completion percentage, team points per game. Some where Mac Jones is significantly better, yards per game, and then touchdowns, picks, and passer rating. Folks, they're almost identical. And again, I was fair. I'm fair to Mac Jones. You guys think I hate. I'm just telling you what I see. His best games, he's fine. His worst games are like Zach Wilson bad. In the middle of the pack is backup quarterback good. And that's what I've said Mac Jones is from the beginning. He's a backup quarterback. He's a good backup, very good backup. But he's a backup. You say, well, what about the personnel around him? Didn't affect Bailey Zappe. Bailey Zappe looked fine with the supporting personnel. So again, I'm not saying that Bailey is the long-term answer for the Patriots. I am saying that Mac Jones isn't. I'm absolutely saying that. I mean, if we're arguing, okay, who's better between the backup and the starter, then you don't have the guy. Simple as that. There's no backup in the league good enough to make you question whether or not you have the starting quarterback in your organization, the right starting quarterback. The Patriots have that. That's why Albert Breer, who again is as good of a source as there is in the NFL, that's why he's putting this out there. So I think this is obvious for New England. Now, New England has other problems other than quarterback that they need to address. Look, they fired Matt Patricia as their former OC, which he's obviously a DC. Joe Judge, who's a special teams coordinator, also helped with the offense. And they brought in an actual offensive coordinator, Bill O'Brien, but they brought in Bill O'Brien. That's a problem in and of itself. Belichick has seemed to have this odd sort of, he's gotten more rigid as the years have gone on in terms of how much control he wants to have over the organization for all their football decisions. I remember I pulled up a graphic from I think it was last summer, when I showed the first round picks. Go look at the first round picks of the Patriots in the last 10 years. Like two of them have been legitimate starters. Most of them are bust. I mean, like out the league busts. Not to mention they got a problem at wide receiver. And not to mention they play in a division with Josh Allen, with a Dolphins team that feels as if they're a quarterback away from competing, and with a Jets team that's getting better and is about to add a franchise quarterback, whether it be Aaron Rodgers, Derek Carr, or Lamar Jackson. I feel like the Patriots are in the worst spot easily in the AFC East. How the mighty have fallen. It is incredible to see, or not incredible necessarily, but eye-opening to see. When you lose that guy, and I get Brady's the greatest ever. Like it's the Bulls losing Michael Jordan. It's the Cavs losing LeBron. It's if, knock on wood, the biggest knock on wood in the history of carving it up. If the Warriors lost Steph Curry, please, God, don't ever let that happen until he retires. And please, God, don't let his retirement be for another decade. Anyways, that's what it would look like. But we praise Belichick as the greatest coach ever. It's got to be better than this. Because again, we talk about the on-field stuff. Belichick's also their unofficial general manager. He picked Mac Jones. He's made these bad selections in the draft. Forget in later rounds. That's when it's hard. The first round, when the talent is evident. Now, how many guys have we seen that have all the talent in the world don't pan out for whatever reason? Whether it's injuries, whether it's they're just not the right system, whether it's off-field stuff. I mean, most guys, especially at quarterback, I mean, it's a small group of guys that could get drafted to garbage organizations and still be great. I think Andrew Luck was one with the Colts. Trevor Lawrence is one with the Jags. The Jags have gotten their act together as of late, but part of that's because they have, in my view, already a top 5 quarterback in the NFL in Trevor Lawrence, and they obviously hired Doug Peterson as well. I think Peyton Manning's in that group, like Tom Brady. There's not many quarterbacks you could just throw into a situation, a bad situation, and they fix it in basically no time. So I understand that part of it, but man, he's failed in too many draft picks for the past decade. This is even when Brady was there. And even now he's gone, it's still continuing. If nothing else, he's more emboldened now that the power struggle has ended between the two. It's all Belichick. Kraft's given him full control, and you've heard these quotes here and there from Bob Kraft talk about like, man, I don't pay this much. I don't do all this to lose all these games we lose. Like there's some pressure being put on Belichick coming from the top, coming from a guy in Bob Kraft, who was always who always had a better relationship with Tom Brady than he did with Bill Belichick. So I don't know. We'll see how it continues to develop and continues to play out if you're the New England Patriots. So, yeah, is the gap between Zappe and Mac big? No. I don't know who's better. I'll probably give the edge to Mac but not by much. Saying that Mac Jones is better than a guy who was drafted from a non-Power 5 program in the 4th round, I hope he is. I hope if you spend a first rounder, he is. Yeah, his time in New England is the clock is ticking. There's no question about it. I would not be shocked if they move on. Back to the NBA, though, for our last topic of the day. So NBA second half of the season, I keep saying second half, the stretch run is a more appropriate and accurate way to put it, begins tonight. You got a bunch of games, some games tipping off very soon. You got Denver and Cleveland. That's a great League Pass game. Celtics play tonight. There's plenty of games tonight. Sixers, Grizzlies tonight. Definitely looking forward to Warriors, Lakers. Lakers are big favorites in that game. -6.5. I'm definitely taking the Warriors at the points, even without Steph and Wiggins. But we're sort of talking about, okay, who's in the running. Before I do, I've got a comment from my man from the Chaotic Sports Podcast here at the Grid, by the way, Patrick Brown. Your take on the Bears possibly trading Justin Fields for a draft pick of Bryce Young. It's a nuanced situation, Patrick. I really liked Justin Fields out of the draft last year. I thought of the 5 quarterbacks taken the first round, he to me was the 3rd best. I thought Lawrence was the clear best quarterback of the draft. I think that's been proven to be the case. And I thought Trey Lance was going to be the 2nd best guy. I guess Justin Fields has proved to be that 2nd best guy, followed by Mac and Zach Wilson. We haven't seen anything from Trey Lance. We haven't seen enough to know whether or not he's the guy or not. Be that as it may, Justin Fields, we understand his ability as a runner. He could improve as a passer, but some of the running is by necessity. His offensive line was garbage. His receivers couldn't separate. So it's on the table. I may talk about that more tomorrow. I've got a Lamar Jackson topic for sure, and I'm probably going to get a Derek Carr topic slid into there as well. But I could understand where the Bears are coming from, but I don't think their major problem they've got to address is the quarterback position. Let's put it that way. I don't think Fields, nor Bryce Young, nor CJ Stroud, nor any Levis, any of these young quarterbacks can necessarily fix all the problems in Chicago right now. I'll leave it at that. But I appreciate the question though, Patrick. I'll get more on that in tomorrow's show, because I've been hearing these reports, and it seems to be a very sort of divisive issue. Those who say Fields should be traded are adamant he should be traded. Those who say, no, you got to keep Fields, say that the Bears would be idiots to trade him. I think I'm somewhere kind of in the middle where I get both sides of it. But I don't know. I mean, I really like Justin Fields. I think if you put him in a situation like if you swap places with him and Trey Lance, heck, he beat Trey Lance last year. Trey Lance had all those playmakers, and Justin Fields beat him. Beat the San Francisco 49ers. Actually, hindsight, looking back, it actually cost the Niners the 1 seed because they finished back a game back of the Philadelphia Eagles. So, hey, the worst team in the league actually sort of altered the playoff picture a little bit. That's why we love the NFL. Big time sense of urgency. Okay, so again, back to the NBA. We've got a lot of games coming up for the stretch run starting tonight. It's February 23rd. The regular season concludes on April 9th on Easter. I'm pretty sure that's Easter. So just about another month and a half, basically, and we're going into the play-in games. And then after that, we're going straight into the playoffs. It's getting closer. The season's flown by. And so the deadline has passed. Teams have made deals. You just saw Atlanta yesterday just fired Nate McMillan. I may talk about that tomorrow. I don't love that by Atlanta. Again, I don't think Nate McMillan is the source of their issues, but we're questioning, okay, who's who? Like, who can make a run? Who's incapable of making a run in the East and in the West? So if we can get the background music going real quick, that'd be great. Here we go. So in terms of teams that can compete, teams that can contend, I take a lot of things in consideration. Have you done so in the past? Do you have a superstar player or two, possibly, in the case of some teams? Do you have a great coach? What's your star's availability come playoff time historically? A lot of things to take into consideration. So we will start in the Eastern Conference with the defending Eastern Conference champion, Boston Celtics. This, to me, is one of the easier ones on the list. Boston Celtics are absolutely championship contenders. This isn't even a question. Okay, they're sitting there as the number 1 seed in the East, the best record in all of basketball. Jason Tatum, to me, is still at least in the MVP race. He likely won't win it, but he's certainly in the race with guys like Jokic and Luka and Joel Embiid and Giannis. He's playing the best basketball of his career under their new head coach, Joe Mazzulla, who is now officially their head coach after signing a long-term deal. Youngest coach of the league. I think he's barely 30, for crying out loud. With this roster, adding Malcolm Brogdon, as I said last offseason, was an incredible pickup. Hats off to the Celtics for that. They needed a true point guard. They got it. Marcus Smart still getting them production. Al Horford's doing his thing. Robert Williams being inserted back into the lineup has only made their defense better. Jaylen Brown was an all-star this year. But this is as deep of a roster you'll find, and it's one of the best teams in terms of offense, defense in the NBA. I think this is one of the easier ones. Boston Celtics, absolutely contenders. Anything short of an Eastern Conference Finals trip is a disaster for Boston. Moving on to a team that's kind of been on the fringe, certainly has improved from last year with some offseason acquisitions, but I do not believe that they are contenders. I think they're pretenders. I'm talking about the Cleveland Cavaliers. I am saying they're pretenders, and that is not just, I'm not just saying that because I don't like Cleveland. I'm just saying they're pretenders. I think Donovan Mitchell, we're not giving enough credit how great of a season he's having. Folks, a couple of months back, this man scored 71 to be exact. Okay, Donovan is one of the great shooters / scorers in the NBA. You have a great point guard in Darius Garland, who probably would have been an all-star had he played enough games. You got the big man, Jared Allen. Number of other pieces around the Cleveland Cavaliers, although they did just buy out Kevin Love, who's now a member of the Miami Heat. I like the young pieces that Cleveland has. I think there's a lot to build around there. Evan Mobley is one of the great young talents in the NBA. He's going to me, be a superstar at some point. But right now in an East that seems to be at the top as good as teams in the NBA. Right in the middle of the East, you're talking about teams like Cleveland kind of be in the middle there. And I'm about to get to another team that's sort of right there with them. It's kind of, okay, Cleveland can win a playoff series, but we'd be shocked if they beat Milwaukee. They would need, knock on wood, obviously, but they would need an injury to go their way. They would need a bad call to go their way. Like, it would have to be a lot of stuff to go Cleveland's way in order to make a run for the NBA Finals, and I don't think they have enough firepower nor experience at this point in time to make a championship run. Cleveland Cavaliers, to me, are pretenders. To a team, this is just for kicks and giggles, the Brooklyn Nets are pretenders. Sorry, Brooklyn. Sorry. You just trade Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. More importantly, you just trade Kevin Durant. Now, I do think, I'm forgetting, Jacques Vaughn, who's now the long-term head coach. Good for him. Should have gotten the job 3 years ago over Steve Nash, as far as I'm concerned. He's a tremendous coach. They've got plenty of young talent. Cam Thomas. They just got Mikal Bridges from the Phoenix Suns. They just got Cam Johnson as well from the Phoenix Suns. Plenty of young talent. This feels like the Brooklyn Nets of 2019, where they'll be competitive in a playoff series. We'll see how far they slip in the standings. I still think they'll absolutely get into the playoffs, but it's rebuild time. So just that was just for fun, because everybody was talking about the Nets every single year. I was outside of 1 year in 2021. I never bought into them. Nets are pretenders. Get ready for this one. The Miami Heat are contenders, ladies and gentlemen. Here's why. Jimmy Butler. You like Jimmy Butler in the playoffs? I do too. Some of those great finals performances against the Lakers in the bubble in 2020. You think about 2022 against the Boston Celtics when his whole roster was as beat up as they come. There was a stretch in which the Miami Heat backcourt of Kyle Lowry and Tyler Hero went a combined 1 for 28 from the field. And Jimmy Butler took that team, a beat-up team, a team that couldn't throw it in the ocean for stretches, against the better Boston Celtics. Jimmy Butler carried them to Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals, and if he makes that pull-up three-point shot, they face the Golden State Warriors in the 2022 NBA Finals. Not just that, Bam Adebayo is an all-star caliber player on both sides of the floor. A Defensive Player of the Year candidate, certainly the preseason, every other year. You just added Kevin Love, veteran leadership, guy who's been there, done that, has a championship ring with the Cavs, brings shooting, stretches the floor. Again, that's something else Miami has, is shooting. We'll see what the status is of Kyle Lowry, but I'm telling you, I'm a believer in playoff Jimmy buckets. Look out for those Miami Heat. Okay, I know they're the 7th seed right now. Watch the heck out. They're going to jump the Knicks. They're not going to have to participate in the play-in tournament as long as Jimmy's healthy. That is the absolute last team. I'd rather face the Cavs than I face the Heat. They took Boston 7 last time. They beat Milwaukee a few years ago in the postseason with an MVP and Defensive Player of the Year, Giannis Antetokounmpo. Remember, right now there's no Chris Middleton for the Bucks. Miami can absolutely get back to the Eastern Conference Finals. 100%. I believe they'll win their first playoff series, whoever it's against, and they have a chance to beat Milwaukee or Boston, who we all believe are the two favorites in the Eastern Conference. Speaking of a team that everybody's high on, I'm sorry, I've seen too much. I'm not. The Philadelphia 76ers. They're pretenders. Like let's stop. Let's stop messing around. Let's stop with this foolishness. Okay. The Philadelphia 76ers are pretenders. Because James Harden, his history in the postseason is as shaky as much of a guy, an MVP candidate and winner, which he was in 2018, has left so much on the table, especially in elimination games. That's where James Harden has really stunk it up. All those Game 6s and Game 7s in Houston last year, the Game 6 against the Miami Heat, sound familiar? In which he basically quit on his team in the second half of that game. A very winnable game, an elimination game for the 76ers. He said, no, Moss, I'm out. I worry about that. And for his running mate, Joel Embiid, here's what I'm concerned about. And I love Embiid. You guys know I thought Embiid probably should have finished second for MVP last year behind Giannis, not Jokic. Let's stop it. But he gets hurt every single year coming into the postseason. We think about last year, some of it's been bad luck. But he had that weird eye injury where he got, I think, elbowed in the eye against the Toronto Raptors in the first round. Really hindered his ability against the Miami Heat in the second round, in which they lost that series in 6 games. You think about 2021, in which he was hurt coming into the Atlanta series, which they lost. You think about 2019, in which he was sick and hurt against the Toronto Raptors. Like this has kind of been his brand, unfortunately. A guy who's, to me, a fringe top 5 player in basketball. Led the league in scoring last year and is top 5 again in scoring this year, averaging over 30 a game and double-digit rebounds. I love Embiid. Never been to the conference finals. Never even been to the conference finals. So, and not to mention, Doc Rivers is their head coach. And we know Doc Rivers' history in the postseason. It's shady at best. Multiple blown 3-1 leads, 3 to be exact, with the Magic, and 2 with the Clippers. This is not, I think he's a good coach. I think he's a little bit still living off of that 2008 championship with the Celtics. I've never seen a coach live off of just one championship more than I have Doc Rivers. But I always say about contenders, I know you're a contender when I have less questions than answers about who you are and what you're going to be when the games matter most. I have nothing but questions about the Sixers. There's a lot of ifs with them. If James Harden shows up in the postseason, which he never does, if Joel Embiid is healthy come the second round, which he rarely is, and if Doc Rivers doesn't make a coaching decision or 2 or 15 that costs a team a series, which is rarely not the case, these Philadelphia 76ers, I'm sorry, they're pretenders. If they run to the Miami Heat today, I'm rolling with the Miami Heat. And then finally, I'm sorry, I said the Bucks were pretenders. I need to change that. The Milwaukee Bucks are absolute contenders. I'll get that graphic up in just a second. Milwaukee Bucks are absolute contenders. Like come on. They got arguably the best player in the world in Giannis Antetokounmpo. They've got a Drew Holiday, who was an all-star this year, who's been, once again, one of the best guard defenders in the NBA. I think I would take him today over Marcus Smart. That's just my personal opinion. I'd roll with Drew Holiday over Marcus Smart in terms of perimeter defense and shot-making ability, for that matter, and on-court decision-making. listen, Milwaukee won the championship just 2 years ago, and they're on an 11-game winning streak. So they're playing their best basketball right now. They're a team that is streaking at the best time. The only question I have for them, and I usually have for them, is Mike Budenholzer, is his lack of adjustments in these big postseason games. That's something that I have always questioned about him. I think even in the championship run 2021 that was the case. In Atlanta, he struggled with that. So that's the only guy I think that can hold this Bucks team back. Everything else, I mean, what's there not to like about Milwaukee? They're top 5 in defense. They're one of the best scoring teams and shooting teams. They added some shooters at the deadline as well. I picked them before the season to get to the NBA Finals. I'm sticking with that. I'm just as confident today, if not more so, with all due respect to the Boston Celtics, than I was at the beginning of this season. Milwaukee Bucks, this isn't even a debate. They're absolutely contenders in the Eastern Conference and to win the championship. Shifting now to the Western Conference, let's please get this one out of the way quickly. The Los Angeles Lakers are pretenders. First of all, they're the 13th seed. I usually don't do this for 13 seeds, talk about whether they're contenders or pretenders, but it's the Lakers. It is LeBron James. And there's the hype and there's the expectation. Do I think the Lakers will get into the playoffs? Yes. Said before the year, I feel like they get in the playoffs as the 8th seed. They moved on from Westbrook. They added numerous pieces that feel as if they're more long-term, like 2024 acquisitions than they are 2023 acquisitions, to try and put them back in that championship contending bubble in the West. LeBron's still playing his best basketball. He talked about these next 23 games are the most important of his career, which, as I said on Monday, felt like a big-time message to Anthony Davis. Again, more questions than answers. AD does not stand for Anthony Davis. It stands for always down, and he is always down this time of year. When he needed him the most, not necessarily his play let you down, although that's been the case from time to time, but his body's let him down, Lakers Nation down. And really, us as NBA fans, I don't like the Lakers, but I like seeing them in big games. I certainly love seeing LeBron in big games. You add D'Angelo Russell, you add Mo Bamba at the trade deadline. By the way, you got rid of Patrick Beverley. Love the moves that they made, but I still question some of the young guys, their team, whether they're ready for a championship run. And at this particular moment in time, who's going to be LeBron's second best player? It should be Anthony Davis, but I don't know when he's going to be available. So the Lakers, I don't even think it's a discussion. They're absolutely pretenders. Moving on, probably the most controversial on this list, but I'm sorry, I just tell you the truth. Memphis Grizzlies are pretenders. Let's stop this right now. Memphis Grizzlies are pretenders in the Western Conference. First of all, remember John Morant said, I'm fine in the West? Yeah, they're a game over 500 against Western Conference opponents. And speaking of John Morant, who I have acknowledged is a superstar, is a top 10 player in the NBA today, is a guy who can put whoever your big is, he can put him on a poster and then some. He's somebody else, kind of like Joel Embiid. I worry about his body this time of year. Remember last year, he got hurt against the Golden State Warriors after suffering a regular season injury. He suffered an injury, I believe, in the bubble in 2020, which cost him that playing game against the Trailblazers. That's kind of been his issue, is whether or not with his style of play, which I don't think is sustainable long-term, just like it wasn't for John Wall or Derrick Rose or Russell Westbrook, I worry if that's not going to be the case for John Morant. As for supporting cast, I know what they are, and they're extremely limited. Desmond Bane, his upside is one of the streakiest shooters in a good way in the NBA. He's an excellent three-point shooter and a good defender. But on his bad nights, he's really bad. He, disappears. Steven Adams, like him, good role player. That's what he is. He's a role player. Jaren Jackson Jr. is an all-star this year, but there was plenty of times last year in the playoffs where he was great in the defensive end, which he always is, but he kind of disappeared offensively, particularly when Ja was on the floor. So if Ja's on the floor, Jaren Jackson's role decreases. If Jaren Jackson's your number one option, which he was in the back half of the Warriors series when Ja went down, then you struggle to get other guys involved. This is a Memphis Grizzlies team we talked about last year was better without Ja than with Ja. He's their best player. We worry about his health. Not to mention all the smack they're talking, not to mention that guy who wears number 24, who's, as I've said numerous occasions, is not a very good basketball player, certainly by NBA standards. Stop. The Grizzlies are not contenders in the West. I'm not so sure they win a playoff series. They probably do, but they barely squeaked by Minnesota last year before Golden State dismantled them for most of those postseason games. Grizzlies are pretenders, as are the Dallas Mavericks. They're pretenders as well. Listen, I did not see the Cowboys, the Mavericks, as contenders coming into this season. I thought you can only go so far with Luka Doncic as sort of the only primary scorer, especially losing Jalen Brunson, who, as we've seen with the Knicks, has been an incredible acquisition for them. But they had Kyrie Irving now. We know wherever Kyrie Irving goes, he's sort of like Russell Westbrook. Obviously, he's a much better player than Westbrook, certainly in terms of efficiency on the offensive end. But everywhere he goes, they instantly get worse. Leaves Cleveland, they still make the finals in 2018. Leaves Boston, they actually get better. They get back to the Eastern Conference Finals and then back to the finals a couple years after that. Okay, leaves Brooklyn. The games he missed in Brooklyn, they were better without him than with him, even in the games Kevin Durant did not play. So you add a ball-dominant guy with another ball-dominant guy in Luka Doncic. You lose depth with Dorian Finney-Smith. I did not like this move at all. It feels odd considering that Kyrie's probably going to leave for either Los Angeles or Phoenix this offseason. The fit in terms of the two star players doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I know it's a small sample size, but they have yet to win a game together. And you saw that play at the end of, I think, the Timberwolves game where they kept passing the ball back and forth. You take the last shot. No, you take the last shot. That is going to rear its ugly head come postseason time. And we know, as I've always said, what is Kyrie Irving's legacy in the playoffs without LeBron James? I'll tell you what it is. Well, I'm sorry, no. 2 playoff series wins. Both coming in the first round. 2019 and 2021. That's it. Mavericks are not championship contenders. The Golden State Warriors obviously are. Come on now. Let's can we stop at the foolishness? With all due respect to people like Charles Barkley, to people in the media writing the Warriors off, Nick Wright, Stephen A. Smith, all people of which I have the most respect in the world for. We've got the best player in the world, Wardell Stephen Curry II, who's going to be coming back next week. Klay Thompson is having his best season of his career since 2019 before he got injured. Draymond Green is still, I don't care what anybody says, watch the games, one of the 5 best defensive players in all of basketball. Not to mention he's invaluable on the offensive end of the floor. Andrew Wiggins is back, and before he took this recent leave of absence, was playing just like his 2022 playoff self, in which he played it great. Was probably Steph's second best teammate in that stretch. Kevon Looney is Mr. Iron Man. You can always guarantee Looney's going to grab you 12, 13, 14 rebounds when he plays high minutes. Jordan Poole's a question mark in terms of his streakiness, shooting the basketball, and the fact that he's a defensive liability. But come on, playoff time rolls around. You got the same core that's won 4 championships, that's won half the championships in the last 8. You trust them, or you trust the team that's never done it before, Memphis, Dallas, who Golden State dismantled in the Western Conference Finals. This isn't even discussion. Golden State does not care about the regular season. I've come to that conclusion. They don't care. They're going to win on the road. Again, the Warriors, every single playoff series under Steve Kerr, they've won at least 1 playoff game. That streak will continue, and the Warriors will minimum get to the Western Conference Finals. Guaranteed, as Charles Barkley would say. To a team that Charles Barkley used to play for, the Phoenix Suns, oh, you better believe they're contenders. 100%. If the graphic would come up for the Phoenix Suns. The Phoenix Suns are absolutely contenders. They added this guy. You might have heard of him, Kevin Durant. I talked to somebody the other day. They told me he's pretty good at basketball. I'll take their word for it. Yeah, you're talking about a guy who averages 30 points a game in his sleep. A guy who has an excellent playoff resume in terms of his numbers, as far as his numbers are concerned. Has gotten to the NBA Finals without Golden State. Won 2 Finals MVPs with Golden State. And in Brooklyn, albeit he lost to the Milwaukee Bucks, was incredible in that Bucks series in Game 5 and in Game 7 in particular, 2 40-point-plus games. You add a guy who's a top 5 player in all the world. You add him with a guy like Devin Booker, who's one of the probably 10 or 15 best scorers in the NBA, and Chris Paul is a floor general. Now, the only question that I have, or 2 questions that I have. Chris Paul, we know his history in the playoffs. He's kind of the king. If Doc Rivers is the king of blowing 3-1 leads, then Chris Paul is the king of blowing 2-0 leads. Like he's done it his whole career. Will that rear its ugly head with Phoenix? DeAndre Ayton and the relationship between him and Monty Williams, will that rear its ugly head. But people have been talking about, what about Phoenix's bench? What about the chemistry with Durant, Booker, and CP3? The chemistry thing, I think they'll hit off right out the bat. KD's expected to return next week. I think on Wednesday is what they said to make his Phoenix debut. I think in terms of a basketball fit strictly, I think they work beautifully together as a trio. The thing I worry about is health, CP3 in the playoffs, and the relationship between Monty and DeAndre Ayton in these big, close, tight playoff games. But again, like Golden State, there is no reason whatsoever that this team should not be at least in the Western Conference Finals, and it'll be a massive disappointment if they're not in the NBA Finals, as far as I'm concerned. The Phoenix Suns, though, absolutely are contenders. The Denver Nuggets as well, they, in my view, are contenders. You have Nikola Jokic, who's playing the best basketball of his career, is playing the first season of his career in which he actually does deserve to be the league MVP. We're not going to talk about the last 2 years when it was an abomination that the NBA media voted him as the MVP back-to-back years. This year, oh, better believe it. To me, he's the front runner. Playing unbelievably efficient basketball, as a triple-double machine, as a center, which is unlike anything we've ever seen. And he's got his sidekick back. He's got his running mate back. He's got Jamal Murray back for the Denver Nuggets. This is a guy in Jamal Murray. In case you forgot, the last time he was in the playoffs, yeah, he had a 50-point playoff game against the Utah Jazz. Yeah, the one game that they won in the Western Conference Finals against the LA Lakers in 2020, Jamal Murray was their best player. So you add him with an incredible bench consisting primarily of shooters, which fits great with Jokic. They add Reggie Jackson, who gives them some depth. You've got KCP, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who's a great shooter, really good defender. I don't know what there isn't to like about Denver. I mean, they're top 5 in offense, top 5 in defense. I think Michael Malone is one of the most underrated coaches in the NBA. I don't know what there isn't to like about the Denver Nuggets. I mean, they're the best team in the West. Their stars are healthy. Their stars, when they're healthy, second round 2019, got to within a game, we're in a game 7 to get to the Western Conference Finals. When they were healthy in 2020, came back not once but twice from 3-1 deficits. And if the Denver Nuggets play the 8 seed today, if I'm not mistaken, I think that they are going to play the Minnesota Timberwolves as the playoffs sit here today. They play the Timberwolves. Yeah, I think they take care of Minnesota pretty quickly. The Denver Nuggets are contenders. And finally, the Los Angeles Clippers are pretenders. They are. I had questions about the Clippers coming into the year. Kawhi's health. And by the way, Kawhi as of late has looked like the Kawhi Leonard of old. But I worry about his health in the playoffs. I worry about Paul George's health all season long, including the playoffs. He struggled with injuries the last few seasons. Of course, they let go of Reggie Jackson. They do add Bones Highland. They do add Eric Gordon, which fit great with their group. But they made the ultimate addition by subtraction move that any single team could possibly make in the NBA, and that is adding Russell Westbrook. He's 7-21 in the playoffs. He shoots sub 40% from the field in those 28 playoff games. These are, by the way, 7-21 in the playoffs post Kevin Durant. And he's going to be starting. He's at his best at this stage of his career come off the bench. He even struggles off the bench at this stage of his career in year 15. Now he's going to be asked to shoot more, be in the late game closing lineup, being asked to make the big time decisions and adjustments and on-court moves on the floor, late game situations. I don't know what there is to possibly like about that move whatsoever. The Los Angeles Clippers. Sorry about this. Sorry to the 13 people on planet Earth that are Clippers fans. Clipper Darrell, Marcellus Wiley, Billy Crystal, the great Billy Crystal. Stop. The Clippers are not contenders. They're not. So there you go. I know I see a ton of comments here. I'll get to those in just a second, but I'll go back over it. In the Eastern Conference, the Celtics, the Heat, and the Milwaukee Bucks are championship contenders. Of the teams that are on the bubble, the Cavs are pretenders, the Nets are pretenders, and the Sixers are pretenders. In the Western Conference, the pretenders, in my view, are the Lakers, Grizzlies, Mavericks, and Clippers. the three, I believe there are three contenders in the West, just as there are there is in the East. The Warriors are contenders, the Suns are contenders, and the Nuggets are contenders. All three of those teams, I would not be shocked in the slightest if they are playing basketball on ABC in June. Same can be said, in my view, about the Celtics, the Bucks, and yes, the Miami Heat. Heat culture is a real thing, ladies and gentlemen. Don't look past that. Okie dokie. So we've got a lot of comments here. Before I do, let's see. I think I've got. Is there any updates recently? Oh, okay. How about this? Bobby Wagner released by the Los Angeles Rams. He's going to be a free agent. That would be a very interesting pickup for a team looking to bolster the linebacking core. Don't forget Bobby Wagner. We didn't talk about him this year because the Rams weren't very good. Bobby Wagner was an All-Pro this year. Again, guy is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer one day and was one of the key guys for that Legion of Boom for Seattle in that run that they made. So that is one of the better free agents out there. Before I get out of here, let's get some comments. Let's see. Patrick Brown says, these next 23 games for LeBron's career, it will be detrimental. If the Lakers come up short, the blame will fall on him. In a perfect world, AD is traded to Portland for Dame this summer. Absolutely. I'm totally with you there. I've been proposing that trade for 2 years on this show. And if the Lakers listen to me, if the Blazers are willing to listen to the Lakers, it'd be a great fit. Patrick says, also the Cowboys are, quote, intrigued by C.J. Stroud. I'll save my thoughts for that one as well. That is a very odd, and I like C.J. Stroud a lot. But I don't know. I don't know. Again, if you're going to move on from Dak Prescott, you better make a 100% sure that you've got the replacement. Otherwise, you're going to be in a bad spot as a franchise. Grady Edwards, what's up, Grady? He says, got to be honest, Patrick, think too much is being made about the next 23 games for LA. LeBron's legacy is set regardless, may just determine the short term for them if they trade Anthony Davis. He said if they go 1-22 10 years from now, nobody will remember that as far as LeBron's legacy. I think LeBron is just trying to motivate his guys. I don't even necessarily think it's about motivating his guys, plural. I think it's guy, singular, Anthony Davis. But yeah, I we'll talk about it. Will it be like a little ding on LeBron? Yeah, but I'm with you, Grady. When we talk about him as, in my view, and I've recently come to this realization as of a couple weeks ago, LeBron as the official GOAT, nobody will bring this up. If we don't bring up Jordan's Wizard years, and I'm fine with that. If you don't want to bring up the fact that Jordan was good but really inefficient and kind of a jerk, he was a jerk in Chicago. He was that on steroids with Washington because he had power as a part owner of the Wizards. Guys like Jerry Stackhouse, Ty Lue, Kwame Brown, famously, who Michael Jordan drafted, they hated him. I mean, hated him in Washington. But we don't remember that, and that's fine. It happened, but I'm fine with that not being used as a way to diminish Michael Jordan's legacy. But let's keep that same energy for LeBron James. Grady Edwards, no Drew Holiday on that Bucks team that lost to Miami. Miami got no shot against the Bucks. That was pre-champ Giannis. Giannis, as we know, him arrived in 2021 when they got the dub. That's fair enough. That's fair. All I'm saying, Grady, is that I've seen Miami in these games for a long time now. I trust Eric Spoelstra, who's one of the better coaches in the league. Jimmy has a great history in the playoffs himself. And a lot of the reasons that Miami didn't make the finals last year is because their roster just fell apart physically. And so, again, we are one Jimmy Butler make away from Boston not even getting to the finals last year. You make a good point about that was being pre-champ Giannis, and he doesn't, I don't think, have the pressure now as he did then. Because that back then it's like, bro, you're the back-to-back MVP. You got a defensive player of the year. Like, you got to show up. You can't come up short. Again, you don't have any rings. And he got, a lot of weight lifted off of his shoulders, as you mentioned, Grady, with that 2021 title. Grady, Doc Rivers is George Karl with the ring, and I love him. But let's be honest, you're right. No conference finals since LeBron won his first title in 2012. Yeah, that's with the Clippers and with the Sixers, and he's had the talent. But again, I don't think any coach in history has blown multiple 3-1 leagues. Doc Rivers has not just blown multiple; he's blown 3 Forget 2, he's blown 3. And all of them coming within, well, no, he blew that one early on in Orlando and then 2 with the LA Clippers. So there's nothing about the Sixers that I trust going into the postseason. Patrick says, I believe the Lakers have a legit chance to make it, but AD is the biggest question. In a perfect world, I take Giannis over AD. That's being honest and straightforward. I absolutely, I'm 100% taking Giannis Antetokounmpo over Anthony Davis. And even if Anthony Davis is at his peak, I'm still rolling with Giannis. I just think he's a more dominant interior presence. He's definitely the better defensive player. In terms of rim protection, he's as good as they come. Not to mention averaging 30 a game. Patrick says, that's a good point, Patrick. He says, Jay Crowder will be an X factor for the Bucks. That was a great pickup for Milwaukee, getting him from the Phoenix Suns for, what was it, 4 second-round picks, which teams were really throwing around these second-round picks. Golden State, spending these second-round picks to get Gary Payton the second back, which I was all for. Love that GP2 is back. I love this. I love this. Grady says, Memphis is free falling. Dylan Brooks, Jaren Jackson Jr. need to keep singing that. I know Shea Sharp is a little before time. The way Memphis carries themselves remind me of those Gilbert Arenas-led Wizard teams that talk smack to LeBron in the 2000s. Yeah, that's oh boy. You know me, Grady. You know how I feel about these Grizzlies. I think we agree on that. They're crazy. Patrick says, Memphis is wilding out. They need to grow up and mature before thinking about being a contender. Wise man once said, the loudest man in the room is the one who's scared, while the other man is quiet. Memphis is loud, but their opponents will beat them with silence on the court. Grady says, love Golden State. They're fringe contenders. I believe they'll finish as 8 to 10 games above 500, but can't deny their record this year. You can't. I'm not going to defend that in the slightest. I did not see Golden State coming out of the All-Star break being 500. I'd have thought you were an idiot if you told me that before the season. If you had told me that, I'd been like, okay, did Steph miss like 75% of the games? No, he's only missed about 30% of the games with some of the injuries. So, yeah. Grady says, Jokic can change the narrative if he gets to the finals. Didn't have an issue with the first MVP, but last year, heck no. I'm with you. I absolutely had more of a problem with the MVP last year. Like, dude, you were the 6th seed, and it got validated. Golden State gentlemen swept you. So, yeah. And by the way, if the narrative was, well, he had a great season, a historic season without his second best player, then why didn't he get Steph the MVP in 2021? He was a low seed. He was the 8th seed, but they got eliminated in the play-in tournament. He didn't have Clay. Jordan Poole wasn't what we've seen him to be now. Why didn't we get Steph the MVP? Yeah, that's what drives me crazy is the media changes the criteria every year. Grady says, West will be Denver, Phoenix, and Golden State if they can get it together, then everyone else. My only concern with the Suns is if they somewhat resemble those late 90s Rockets team, which were old geezers chasing rings. I mean, I'm with you. I think those are the 3 best teams. I think those are, now obviously by definition, only 2 of them can get to the conference finals, but I'm with you. I think that to me, those are the 3. The 3, again, like I said, the 3 teams that if they are in the NBA Finals, I am not surprised. I got to be honest with you. I'd be shocked, beyond shocked, if the Clippers got to the finals. I'd be beyond shocked if the Grizzlies get to the NBA Finals. I'd be stunned if the Lakers got in. So, who else I have in the Western Conference? I'd be shocked if the Mavericks got in. This Kyrie Luka fit is odd. I don't get it at all. But they could be. I mean, you mentioned Phoenix. Now, Devin Booker, I think, is kind of entering his prime, so that's not a problem with him. But Chris Paul is certainly getting up there in age. His best days are behind him. I still think KD is in his prime, though. He's, 34 years old? I think he'll be going on 35 this September. I mean, does he look like he's aging to you? And he's still an excellent defensive player as well. The issue with Phoenix is the injuries to me. That's the only thing that concerns me with the Phoenix Suns. But it's going to be interesting. We got 23 games, 24 games in some cases for these teams the rest of the way. This is going to be a fun finish to the NBA regular season. I'm telling you right now, and the playoffs are going to be crazy. Last comment. Grady says, more shocked if the Lakers get to the finals or the Clippers. I got to be honest, Grady, that's a tough question. I'm serious because the Lakers are the 13th seed. they're certainly not even not close to the roster that the Clippers are. But the Clippers' best player is rarely available. The second best player in the Clippers tends to get hurt this time of year. And their third, fourth best, fifth best player, wherever you put Westbrook, is a playoff liability. So probably the Lakers. I mean, this would have to be unprecedented to go from 13 seeds to the NBA Finals. That's not even, I've never heard of that. So that's where I'd have it. But I would be almost as shocked if the Clippers make the finals. I don't buy into either LA team whatsoever. It's amazing. All these stars came to LA in 2019, and we've only got one title in the last 4 years, and that was the Lakers in 2020. That's it. So they have not lived up to the hype. Heck, we've never even got, the one disappointment is we never got to see them in the playoffs, which I'm pissed at the Clippers for blowing that 3-1 lead in 2020, because a Clippers-Lakers Western Conference Finals in 2020 would have been amazing. Lakers probably would have won, but it would be entertaining nonetheless. All right, that is all the time we have for today's show. Appreciate everybody stopping by as always. Be sure to catch Carving It Up Live tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time on Facebook Live, YouTube, and on Twitter. And be sure to like, share, comment, take 2 seconds out of your day. Hit that big red subscribe button right there. Helps the channel grow exponentially. And be sure to go subscribe to the Grid Network. That is GRYD, the Grid Podcast Network on YouTube, which is where you can find my show as well as the shows as there are other incredible creators. You saw Patrick Brown in the comments of the Chaotic Sports Podcast. His show's there. Barry Grant Jr., the All Even Podcast. Just won a big-time bet the other day. Might want to check that out. That was crazy. Crazy what he's doing to his poor guest. You have to check that out. The Cowboys Can Fan Podcast. Shout out to my guys, Anth, Alex, Adam in Canada. Big Cowboys fans. Amazing show. Please go check their stuff out. Ryan Flowers, Clutch Sports Talk. You got that. And you've got Alfred Parsard Jr. bringing back one of my favorite podcasts, the Metropolitan Report. He's a big Mets fan, loves talking baseball, is as good at talking baseball as anybody, honest to God, that I've seen. And so please check out the Metropolitan Report. It's a new episode out now. I would suggest you watch it as opposed to listening to it, because I'll just leave it at that. Watch the show. It's great stuff. Like, seriously, as soon as you get off the show, if you got at least 5 minutes, if not whatever it was, 40 minutes, however long his show was recently, go check out the Metropolitan Report on the Grid Network. If you're a Mets fan, if you're a baseball fan, you're going to love it. All right, that is, I already said that. That is all the time we have for today's show. See y'all tomorrow. Please continue to stay safe out there and be sure to take care of your physical and your mental health. God bless you all. Peace out. Gotta quit talking, Memphis. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube. Be sure to click that big red subscribe button and go check out the other clips and full shows of Carving It Up Live. Have a blessed day.